the key to unlocking space, opening speech, a future worth getting excited about. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I want to start with a question, and it's maybe the most important question any of us can ask. What kind of future do you want? Do you want a future where you wake up in the morning and you're excited about what's ahead? Where you feel that tomorrow somehow will be better than yesterday? Because for me, that's the question that drives everything. It's not about money. It's not about fame or success. It's about possibility. The idea that the future could actually be something worth getting excited about. And for me, that future, the one that really feels alive, is a future where we're a spacefaring civilization, a species that explores, expands, and reaches beyond Earth. Because staying on one planet forever, that just feels limited. It's like reading only the first chapter of the greatest story ever written. So I think humanity has a choice to make. Right now, a fork in the road of our destiny. We can choose to look down, to stay confined to one fragile world, and hope that nothing goes wrong. Or we can choose to look up and become something more. Because if there's one thing the 4.5 billion year history of Earth has taught us, it's that life is fragile. Extinction isn't the exception, it's the rule. There have been countless worlds before us, and life, again and again, has been erased by nature, by time, or by itself. At some point, whether it's an asteroid, a supervolcano, or something we humans trigger, Earth will face a day when survival is no longer guaranteed. So when people ask, why go to Mars? Or why build rockets? I say, it's not a luxury, it's an imperative. Becoming a multiplanetary species is the only real life insurance policy for consciousness itself. It's how we preserve everything we've achieved: art, science, stories, ideas, everything that makes us us. If we can spread life beyond Earth, then even if one world falls, the light of consciousness will still continue. And a civilization that exists on multiple planets is one that could last 10 times longer than any single planet one. That's why this matters. That's why we're here. Now, for over half a century, this dream seemed impossible, something that belonged only in science fiction. We went to the moon, and then we stopped. And people often ask why. What held us back? It wasn't physics. It wasn't technology. It was economics. It's absurdly, fundamentally expensive to get things into space. The cost per kilogram has been so high that we simply couldn't build a sustainable path forward. That's the wall we've been trapped behind. And today I want to talk about how we break that wall. Because there is a way. There's one principle, one simple, elegant idea that changes everything. That principle is reusability. If we can build rockets that fly again and again, just like airplanes, then the entire equation changes. Access to space becomes affordable, frequent, and open to all of humanity. That's the key to unlocking the future. And we at SpaceX are on the verge of proving that this isn't science fiction anymore. It's reality. The cost of throwing away rockets. When you think about it, the way we've been doing space flight, it's kind of crazy. We spend years designing these incredible machines, precision-built, highly engineered, with millions of individual components and materials that can survive fire, pressure, and vacuum. Each rocket is a masterpiece. And then we fly it once and throw it away. That's just insane. Imagine if Boeing built a 747, flew it from Los Angeles to Tokyo, and then scrapped it after landing. They'd go bankrupt before the second flight. And yet that's exactly how spaceflight has worked for the last 60 years. Every time we launch a rocket, we toss the most expensive part into the ocean. It's like watching someone light a pile of cash on fire, except that pile is $100 million. When you look at it from an engineering standpoint, it's not that we didn't know reusability was important. We just couldn't figure out how to do it. And the challenge wasn't lack of intelligence, it was mindset. Because when the Apollo program ended, we sort of stopped trying to make things reusable. We went backward. The space shuttle was a step toward reusability, but it wasn't full reusability. It was partial. The orbiter came back, but the boosters were still expensive to refurbish, and the external tank was gone forever. And so for decades, the cost of getting to orbit hovered around $10,000, $20,000 per kilogram. That's fine for satellites, for governments, for scientific missions, but it's not fine if we want to build cities on Mars. You can't move 1 million people to another planet when each ticket costs hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not colonization, that's a museum project. So the biggest obstacle wasn't gravity, it wasn't the vacuum of space, it was the economics. Because if you can't reuse your hardware, you'll never get exponential progress. You'll always be trapped in linear growth, one launch, one rocket, one huge bill. And that means you can't iterate fast enough, you can't learn quickly enough, you can't fail forward. Reusability changes that equation completely. When a rocket lands and flies again, it's not just cheaper, it's a feedback loop. Each flight gives you data. Each landing teaches you something new. You start improving not every decade, but every week. That's how SpaceX made progress. We didn't get it right the first time, far from it. We failed, over and over again. The first landing attempts were brutal. Some rockets exploded on the pad. Some crashed into the ocean. We called it rapid unscheduled disassembly. But each time we learned, we adjusted the guidance, we improved the legs, we recoded the algorithms, and then one day it worked. A rocket flew to space, came back down through fire and wind, and landed vertically, perfectly upright. It was one of those moments where the future just snapped into focus, because that wasn't just a landing. That was the beginning of a new era. It meant that from that point on, spaceflight didn't have to be disposable. It could be sustainable, it could be iterative, it could scale. And scaling, that's how you build a civilization in space. It's not about one rocket. It's about building a system, a machine, that builds machines where every launch teaches you how to make the next one cheaper, faster, and better. That's what reusability is about. It's not just saving money, it's saving time. It's accelerating evolution. Because progress is a function of iteration speed. If you can fly, land, and fly again, you learn 1,000 times faster. That's the real power. That's why throwing rockets away isn't just wasteful, it's limiting the future. We can't build a multi-planetary civilization with a throwaway mindset. We can only build it if we build to last. Engineering reusability. You know, people often think that making rockets reusable is just about adding landing legs and some fuel for the way down. But that's not really what it's about. It's about designing everything from the engines to the tanks to the avionics around one simple question: can this survive the trip twice? Because if it can't, then you're not really reusing anything. You're just delaying the disposal. At SpaceX, when we started thinking about reusability, we didn't copy anyone else's approach. No one had done it successfully. We had to start from first principles. That's basically the physics approach. You strip away all the assumptions. You ask, what do we know for sure? Then you build upward from there. So let's think about a rocket. At its core, it's a big metal tube filled with fuel and oxidizer with some engines at the bottom. That's it. The materials, aluminum, carbon fiber, titanium, they're not magical. They're things you can buy on the open market. In fact, if you look at the commodity cost of what a Falcon 9 is made of, it's maybe 2% of the price of the rocket. 2%. That means 98% of the cost is in the process, manufacturing, labor, testing, logistics, and then throwing it away after one flight. It's like if you made a Ferrari, drove it once, and then crushed it into a cube. That's the absurdity we wanted to change. So we asked, what if we could make a rocket that lands back like a helicopter, refueled, checked, and ready to fly again within days? Now, when I said that in 2011, people thought it was a joke. They literally laughed. Even inside NASA, people said, yeah, sure, good luck with that. Because the old space paradigm said, you can't do that, it's too complex, too risky, too heavy. And they weren't entirely wrong. Adding legs, grid fins, and reserve fuel means extra mass. And in rocketry, every kilogram matters. So yes, it reduces the payload capacity. That's just physics. But here's the part they didn't get. It doesn't matter if you lose 10% of your payload if your cost drops by 70%. Because what you really care about is cost per kilogram to orbit, not payload per flight. That's what I mean when I say most people optimize for the wrong variable. They try to win the game that doesn't matter. We're trying to change the rules of the game entirely. And that's why, from the beginning, we designed the Merlin engine and the Falcon 9 booster for reusability. not as an afterthought as the core architecture. We tested everything relentlessly. Grasshopper, F9, RDev, these were our first flying laboratories. Little hops at first, 6 feet off the ground, then 60, then 600. Each time a little higher, each time a little more confident. And then came the real challenge, landing from orbit, coming back from hypersonic speeds through the plasma with limited control surfaces and only a few seconds of fuel left. It was brutal. Our first attempts exploded. Some spun out of control. Some missed the drone ship by meters. We learned the hard way sometimes with a $40 million fireball what doesn't work. But we never stopped because every explosion, every piece of telemetry, every camera feed was information. And information is how you win. We didn't treat failure as an endpoint. We treated it as a data point. That's a huge cultural shift. At SpaceX, the engineers aren't punished for failure. They're punished for not learning fast enough. That's how you accelerate progress. And slowly, painfully, but surely, the explosion stopped. The landing started working. We watched a 15-story rocket descend from the sky, hover, and set itself down as softly as a feather touching sand. That moment when Falcon 9 landed for the first time, that was the future arriving in real time. It meant that from now on, rockets could be more like airplanes. They could fly, land, refuel, and fly again. It wasn't perfect at first. The refurbishment process was long. We had to check every weld, every joint. But iteration by iteration, it got faster. We cut days into hours, weeks into days. We started reflying boosters, not once, but 10, 20, 30 times. And suddenly, the impossible became normal. Landing rockets became routine. The world stopped cheering, and that's how you know you've changed history. Because when something extraordinary becomes ordinary, that's progress. So yes, reusability was a massive engineering challenge, but it was also a philosophical one. It forced us to rethink what waste even means. If you want to build a civilization on Mars, you can't waste anything. You have to reuse everything, hardware, materials, energy, knowledge. That's the mindset shift we need, not just for rockets, but for humanity itself. The revolution of reuse. When that first booster landed, a lot of people thought, okay, that's cool, but does it really matter? And I get that question a lot. Because from the outside, it looks like a trick, a stunt, a rocket standing upright, flames shooting out, great for headlines, right? But it wasn't a stunt. It was a revolution. That moment, that first landing, changed everything. It meant we were no longer burning money every time we reached space. It meant spaceflight could finally enter the era of industrial scalability. Think about what happens when you go from single-use to reusability. When the Wright brothers built their first plane, they didn't destroy it after every flight. That's why aviation took off, because they could fly, fix, fly again, improve, iteration speed. That's the hidden engine of progress. But spaceflight never had that luxury. Every launch was a one-off event. You built the hardware, you flew it once, and then you started from zero again. Reusability breaks that cycle. It turns spaceflight from a handcrafted, artisanal process into a repeatable, scalable industry. That's the moment we went from launch company to transportation system. And the implications are massive because cost is the final gatekeeper of expansion. If you lower the cost, you open the door to everything else. Suddenly, putting hundreds, even thousands of satellites into orbit becomes economically viable. That's Starlink. Suddenly, sending probes to other planets isn't a billion-dollar gamble, it's a weekly mission. And suddenly, building a city on Mars isn't a fantasy, it's a financial equation. If you can reuse rockets 100 times, the cost per flight drops by 2 orders of magnitude. That's not 10% cheaper, that's transformative. A single booster reused 20, 30, 50 times changes the economics of space, just like the steam engine changed the economics of land and sea. That's the level of impact we're talking about. And that's why I always say the first time a rocket landed, humanity crossed a threshold. We entered a new phase of civilization. Because for the first time in history, we had a way to leave our planet that could actually scale. It's easy to miss how big that is because we've normalized it so quickly. Now, a rocket landing is just another clip on Twitter, But if you zoom out, this is as significant as the first reusable ship crossing the Atlantic. That's the analogy. Before ships could make the round trip, exploration was unsustainable. You could go, but you couldn't come back. Once ships became reusable, trade, migration, civilization itself, they expanded exponentially. That's what's happening now, except our ocean is space. And the really exciting part, this is just the beginning. Because reusability isn't just a SpaceX thing, it's a philosophy. It's a way of thinking about efficiency, sustainability, and scale. The same principle that lets us land a rocket can also make cars cheaper, batteries recyclable, and tunnels faster to build. It's the same idea expressed in different languages. At Tesla, we reimagined the factory itself. We built machines that build machines. We designed processes that can be reused, optimized, and scaled. The Gigapress that casts an entire car frame in one shot, that's reusability of process. In energy, when we recycle every atom of a battery, that's reusability at the material level. In tunneling, when we take the dirt from the ground and turn it into bricks to sell, that's reusability of waste. You start seeing this pattern everywhere. Nature itself runs on it. The Earth reuses everything, water, carbon, energy, in endless cycles. That's how ecosystems sustain themselves. That's how we must build our civilization as an ecosystem, not an extractor. So reusability isn't just about rockets. It's about respecting the physics of reality. Nothing is wasted. Everything is transformed. And that's the real revolution. It's not just technological. It's philosophical. It's about shifting from a mindset of consumption to one of continuity. Because if we're serious about becoming a multiplanetary species, we can't bring a throwaway culture with us. We have to evolve technically and morally. Every rocket we land, every booster we refly, is not just an engineering achievement. It's a statement about who we are and how we choose to build the future. Economics of the future. When we talk about cost, people often think of it as just dollars and cents. But really, cost is about access. It's about how often you can try, how much you can risk, how fast you can learn. If each launch costs hundreds of millions of dollars, you can't afford to fail, and when you can't afford to fail, you can't afford to innovate. That's why reusability changes everything. It breaks the economic barrier that has held back space for over half a century. We used to think of spaceflight like a national event, a once-a-year thing, millions of people watching, billions of dollars spent. Now, it's becoming a service industry. You can launch payloads weekly, even daily, the same way airplanes take off and land. That's the power of scale. And when you reach scale, the cost per launch drops dramatically, not just by 10%, but by factors of 10. When we reuse a booster 10 times, we divide its cost by 10. When we reuse it 100 times, space becomes cheaper than air cargo. Think about that for a moment. The day will come when sending something to orbit costs less than shipping it across the Pacific. That's when the flywheel starts turning. Lower cost, higher flight frequency, faster iteration, better reliability, even lower cost. That's the compounding loop that builds civilizations. It's how railroads connected continents, how the internet connected humanity, and now how rockets will connect planets. At that point, space isn't just for exploration anymore. It becomes an economy. You'll have manufacturing in orbit, mining on asteroids, tourism, science, energy from solar satellites, beaming power back to Earth. You'll have networks like Starlink, planetary scale internet built on top of that reusability engine. And each of those systems feeds back into the same economic core, cheap, frequent, reliable access to space. It's like unlocking a new continent, not metaphorically, but literally. A new frontier of resources, ideas, and opportunities that exist above our heads. And the moment you make the cost of going there reasonable, everything else follows naturally. It's the same pattern we've seen in history. When shipping became cheap, we got global trade. When computing became cheap, we got the internet. When access to space becomes cheap, we get a spacefaring civilization. That's what reusability really means. It's not just an engineering milestone, it's a tipping point for humanity. Because the truth is, economics drives destiny. You can't build a city on Mars if every brick costs a fortune to send. You can't terraform a planet if each launch bankrupts a nation. But if launches are cheap, if rockets are as reliable as airplanes, then suddenly the impossible becomes inevitable. You start seeing a world where thousands of rockets are flying every day, ferries between planets, supply chains between worlds, factories on Mars producing fuel from CO2 and water ice, sending it back to orbit, closing the loop. Every step self-reinforcing, like a living ecosystem, growing stronger with each cycle. That's the economic logic of the future. And it all starts with one simple principle. Don't throw your rockets away. That's it. That's the spark that ignites a multi-planetary civilization, building the future Starship and the next leap. So how do we actually build this future? How do we go from a few reusable rockets to a civilization among the stars? The answer is Starship. Starship is more than just a rocket. It's a system designed to make spaceflight truly routine, to take everything we've learned about reusability and scale it up to the level of a civilization. It's the first vehicle built to carry life, not just satellites, to other worlds. Fully reusable, rapidly turnable, capable of lifting over 100 tons to orbit and coming back ready to fly again. No more expendable stages, no more one-off launches. A single Starship could fly hundreds of times. A fleet of Starships could transport the building blocks of a new world. And that's the plan. That's the dream. We're building a system that can carry everything humanity needs to survive and thrive: habitats, machinery, food, water, people, everything. Starship isn't just a rocket. It's the ship that builds the fleet. Because once we prove it works, once we can mass produce Starships, the scale changes from a few launches per year to multiple launches per day. Think about that. Hundreds of Starships taking off, landing, refueling, flying again, every single one helping to build a self-sustaining civilization on Mars. And here's the thing, most people miss Starship isn't just about Mars. It's about Earth too. It's about building a transportation system that can deliver goods anywhere on the planet in under an hour. New York to Tokyo, 45 minutes. Cargo, rescue missions, global logistics redefined. The same technology that lets us colonize Mars also makes life on Earth better, cleaner, faster, more connected. That's the power of engineering when it's aligned with a higher purpose. Now, people often ask me, why Mars? Why not the Moon, or Venus, or orbit? And I always say Mars gives us the chance to begin again. It's close enough to reach, far enough to matter. It has gravity, an atmosphere, resources. It's doable. And maybe one day we'll look up at that red dot in the night sky and know there's a city there, lights glowing faintly through the dust, humans living, working, raising families under two suns. That's the moment civilization becomes multiplanetary. But make no mistake, this won't be easy. It'll take decades of hard work, thousands of launches, millions of tons of cargo. It will take courage, sacrifice, the willingness to bet everything on a dream that might outlive us. But that's what humanity has always done. When our ancestors crossed oceans, they didn't do it because it was easy. They did it because it was necessary. Because somewhere deep down, we're wired to explore, to build, to go beyond. Starship is just the next vessel in a story that began the moment life looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. So yes, it's a rocket, but it's also a symbol, a statement that says we're not done yet, we're just getting started. And if we can make Starship work, if we can build that bridge between worlds, then the rest, terraforming, settlement, new ecosystems will follow. Because when you can go to space as easily as you fly across the Earth, everything changes. You don't have to ask permission from the universe anymore. You just go. And when that day comes, when the first human steps onto Mars, when we look up and see two worlds connected, we'll know that reusability wasn't just a technical breakthrough, it was a turning point in human destiny. We will have become what we were always meant to be, a species among the stars, why it matters. And at the end of the day, this isn't really about rockets. It's not even about Mars. It's about life. It's about whether life, this fragile, improbable spark of consciousness, continues beyond one small world. Everything we've ever known, every song, every story, every child that's ever laughed, every dream that's ever been dreamed, it all exists on this tiny blue dot floating in the dark. And if we stay here forever, if we never expand, then one day everything ends. That's not pessimism, that's just physics. Stars die, planets change, extinction is the default in this universe. But consciousness, the ability to reflect, to imagine, to create, that's rare. That's precious. And maybe, just maybe, it's the universe becoming aware of itself. If that's true, then preserving and expanding consciousness is the most important thing we could ever do. That's what this is about. That's why SpaceX exists. That's why we build rockets, why we take risks, why we work nights and weekends and holidays, because the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just trying to build a company. We're trying to build a future worth believing in, a future where humanity survives, where children grow up looking at the night sky and know those lights up there aren't just stars. Some of them are homes. Places where people live, work, laugh, fall in love, under different skies, on different worlds. That's what this whole journey leads to. Not just Mars, but a network of life that spans the solar system, and maybe one day beyond it. That's what multiplanetary really means. It's not a slogan, it's a moral imperative. Because if we can build a civilization that survives the test of time, a civilization that carries art, music, science, compassion to the stars, then all the struggle, all the effort will have been worth it. And I know some people say it's crazy that we should fix Earth first. And they're right, we should fix Earth. We must. But those two missions aren't opposites. They're connected. Becoming multiplanetary forces us to become better stewards of our own planet. It pushes us to innovate, to use resources wisely, to understand the fragility of life by seeing it from a cosmic distance. When you look at Earth from orbit, you don't see borders, you don't see politics, you see home. And you realize that's all of us. That's everything. That's why this matters. Because the same technology that takes us to Mars can clean our air, power our cities, and connect our world. The same spirit that builds rockets can build hope. We do this not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Because life deserves a chance to continue, to grow, to flourish. And if humanity can look up one day and see the glow of a human city on another world, we'll know we made it. We beat the odds. We took a fragile flame of consciousness and carried it across the void. That's why we go. That's why this matters. Because the universe is vast. And it would be such a terrible waste for it to remain dark and silent when it could be filled with life, with laughter, with light. So let's make that future. Let's build it together. For us, for the generations to come, for the story of life itself. Because one day, when we're living among the stars, we'll look back at this moment and realize this was the beginning. The moment we decided to become more than just a species on one planet. The moment we chose to keep the light of consciousness alive forever